Also, I do want to acknowledge the recent loss that the First Nation community has experienced. It's a terrible grief. Public comment on agenda items. Larson.
Thank you, Mayor Law. I'll now make an open call for comments. For those in the gallery who wish to speak, do raise your hand. If there is anyone attending online via Zoom that would like to make a comment, you can do so now using the Q&A function. I will now do a call. Calling once. Calling twice. Calling 3 times. There are no comments over Zoom at this time, Mayor Law.
Okay, and I just want to acknowledge I have Dr. Jim Jameson here signed up. He is not here and was looking to see if perhaps it's out in the hall. I'm just going to go give him a chance just in case. Want to make sure he's where. Not here? Not here. Okay. There is different questions that so the timing opportunity. No correspondence, presentations, reports. 10.1 temporary use permit. We have a mobile food vendor. Mr. Shorthall. Mayor and Council. Temporary use permit for 1451 Pacific Rim Highway. One of 2 tonight. It's for a mobile food vendor operating out of Surf Grove Campground. Authority. So short or a temporary use permit is to allow a use not ordinarily allowed or permitted by the zoning bylaw, regulated by Division 8 of the Local Government Act, may be issued from 1 to 3 years. Council holds discretion over issuing a temporary use permit. Both the initial permits and if a renewal is sought, these are to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. And again, temporary use permit is just that. It's supposed to be temporary and not represent long-term use or a long-term change of the zoning. Looking at the application, it's 1451 Pacific Rim Highway. It's currently used as a commercial campground. The applicant is Surf Grove Campground. The proposal is for the continuation of a mobile food vendor operated by Yuki Poki. They are seeking a 3-year term. There is no change of scope, site layout, no additional servicing requests, no vegetation removal being proposed. It's a continuation of the current permit and it's currently on the site. There are ongoing discussions with a representative from Surfco around long-term compliance, so zoning amendment to allow this use on a long-term basis. So the subject property, you can see on the map here with a red outline, 1451 Parkland Highway. It's currently zoned C6, which is Campground Commercial District. It is just over 25 acres in size. There is 3 development permit areas on the property. It is exempt from all of these as there's no alteration to the land being proposed by the renewal permit. The official community plan identifies this area as the ocean interface, and it is located within a previously disturbed area. And another point just beyond the screen is that it is not visible from Cox Bay or from it's quite heavily surrounded by vegetation. So in April 2023, the initial permit was issued for 3 years. It has been operating, as far as the planning department are aware, without any identified concerns in terms of land use or bylaw infractions. In April 2025, the operator changed. So the initial permit was for, although it was for Surf Grove Campground, the vendor was Off-Grid Camper. And in 2025, Q&amp assumed temporary use permit. Temporary use permits run with the land, not by the vendor itself. So they assumed the temporary use permit under the same conditions as the initial permit. We received a renewal application in March. Fees were paid in May, and that's when started the process within the planning department. So in terms of land use and policies, staff reviewed this against our community plan. So high level supports tourism, commercial services, low impact economic support for economic activities. The zoning, it is compatible with the surrounding use being the commercial campground, so it's ancillary to that. Temporary use permit policy speaks to commercial use being a viable use for economic diversification and supporting economic resilience in the community, and also as a low impact use as it's in a previously disturbed area. Again, no identified conflicts with the land use compatibility and surrounding areas. So in terms of the site itself, it has previously been disturbed. It's a developed area, it's a gravel lot. The mobile food vendors on site, some seating surrounding that. I guess I should say the temporary use permit renewal is usually it's considered against the initial permit term to see how it performed within the first 3 years. So a lot of these remain unchanged from the first permit. No vegetation is proposed to be removed, no additional structures. In terms of servicing, there is no extra additional connections being requested. The same traffic impact in terms of the circulation and the access to the site remains unchanged. So of course, water is a concern for the District of Tofino. So there's no impact or there's no substantial changes to the initial application. So it's a minor commercial use within a larger campground operation. So the water use is anticipated to be minimal. No additional water demand being proposed. And also similar with previous TUP applications, the allocation for water is anticipated to be drawn from larger projects that we still have in the queue. Might not be at the permit stage, but water has been allocated. So it intended to draw from this water allocation for the period of the temporary use permit. So we evaluated this with infrastructure and public works. Staff for infrastructure and public works were satisfied that this can be accommodated within the current service capacity without any substantial draw from their current capacity. So as per the Local Government Act, community engagement, we are obliged to mail and hand deliver notices to properties within a 60-meter radius of the subject property. We also post in the public notification in the Western newspaper. We also circulate referral to the fire department. So throughout all of the engagement, there was no concerns mentioned from the fire department or no comment from the fire department, and also no input from the public in terms of supporting or against this application. I think that brings me to my recommendation.
Excellent, Mr. Phil. Any questions? Maybe we can just see councilors up there. Any questions or clarity from council? Seeing no hands, comments. Seeing no hands, would the councillor like to read the recommendation? Councillor Bowman.
I move that the temporary use permit attached to Appendix 1 titled Temporary Use Permit for Mobile Food Vendor 1451 Pacific Rim Highway dated May 26, 2026 be to permit the operation of one mobile food and beverage service for the period of 3 years be approved for issuance.
Second by Mr. Thomas. Any further comments? All in favor? None opposed. Motion is carried. Thank you. You're up next.
So another temporary use permit tonight. This one is for 601 Campbell Street. The proposal is for a commercial parking lot operated by Robbins. So skip past this slide saying it already applies. Provision 8 of the Local Government Act regulates temporary use permits. So this application, this temporary use permit application is for a commercial parking lot. Scale of use is what's being proposed by the applicant is a total of 29 parking stalls. The applicant has entered into an agreement with Robbins Parking, who would be operating and managing the site. The site shall be active from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. There is no overnight parking being permitted. From talking to the applicants, at least 3 stalls would be proposed for accessible parking. The applicant is open to increasing that number. The existing site condition, it is a gravel lot. There is no substantial site works to be proposed. Some very minor infrastructure related to operating this as a commercial parking lot would need to happen on site, but nothing substantial and nothing requiring a building permit. Subject property is 601 Campbell Street. This blue outlined parcel. It is zone C2, general commercial district, which is quite inclusive in terms of emissions allowed. However, parking is not considered within this, and this is why we're requiring temporary use permit. Current use, it is largely vacant. There's a small storage shed, which hosts some wood, and I believe this is to support the shelter restaurant that was once on the site. The area is just, it's 0.27 acres. The development permit area is gateway. However, it is exempt from development permit from what's currently being proposed. The official community plan identifies this area within the village land use designation and also within the village containment boundary. Okay, so this may know there was once a restaurant on the site in December 2022. That restaurant unfortunately burned down. The site, once it was cleared, remained vacant for quite a number of years. We received an application in January 2026 proposing to turn this vacant lot into a commercial parking lot. As it's attached to one of the appendices to the report, the site layout and the map, which proposed 29 parking stalls, closely mimics the parking layout that was once there historically when the restaurant was in use. So no major changes in terms of what was historically on the site. A little bit more densification in terms of parking, as there is a building, it is no longer there. There's no additional structures being proposed. The idea of the financial intent behind this is to offset some of the costs associated with maintaining a vacant lot. So staff evaluated this application in terms of our official community plan, parking policy, zoning bylaw. We found it generally supportable in terms of transportation and mobility objectives. So to support walkability within downtown core, reduce congestion, also to support our active transport or to support our public transportation infrastructure we have within the District of Tofino. Also supports economic activity within the downtown core. Footfall would increase. I know a lot of the neighboring businesses sent letters of support saying that their businesses are always fighting for parking within those areas. Parking policy speaks to the transportation infrastructure and also to reduce circulation of traffic within town. So peak summer months, tourists circling the downtown core looking for parking, whereas parking at the beginning of the downtown core to support walking within the downtown or into the downtown area, I should say. For Local Government Act community engagement, we notified Subject property is within a 60-meter radius, both hand delivered and also mailed. Also, a notification was put in the Westerly newspaper and was also circulated to the fire department. No concerns were identified by the fire department. And up until 3:30 p.m. today, we had received 1 phone call and 10 emails. This is from a combination of residents and also local business owners. They were all in support of the application. To the recommendation for today.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, council, we're gonna look for questions for clarity first, and then if there are any comments, we'll go there. Councillor Steer.
Great, thank you through the chair, and thank you, Mr. Shortall, for that. Just a quick question. In the report, it had talked, I'm very much in support of the application. Just one quick question around in the report, it talks about screening potential, additional screening, and the applicant is willing to provide that. I see this as a potential for public art installation, but I'm just wondering if there's been discussion with the applicant in terms of screening, as that is, be a large parking lot in that location. I'm wondering if there's been any further discussion around additional screening for that property.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Sear. Yes, I spoke to the applicants in terms of screening. There are some conditions in the temporary use permit that speak to screening, as those are zoning bylaw. However, to protect sightlines, we thought that we would go with how the site is rated at the moment. There is a small fence and some vegetation there. We did not want to go initially too heavy on screening as to protect sightlines. But this is something we can or intend to revisit should the temporary use permit be approved. And also the applicant is willing to work with the district to make this work if current screening is not effective.
Super. Okay, I see no other hands up. Okay, Councillor Anderson.
I'm also in support of this. I think any increase in parking sort of helps the overall parking picture. I do have one comment on the accessible parking. The location of this lot, there aren't a lot of sidewalks once you get off your accessible parking spot. It may not be accessible once you get off the lot. So I'm hoping that some thought will be given to locating those spots as close as they can be to the crosswalk. So that's my only comment.
Staff's noted.
Yeah,
great. Okay, I think it sounds like everybody's quite in support of this. Is there anybody not in support who want to talk? Seeing none. Okay, would the councillor like to read this recommendation? Councillor Master.
That be authorised to issue the temporary use permit TUP 04-26. That's as Appendix 1 to the staff report titled Temporary Use Permit Commercial Parking Lot 601 Campbell Street, dated May 26, 2026, for a period of 3 years to commit a commercial parking lot.
seconded by Moss.
Any further comments? All in favor? None opposed, motion's carried. Super, thank you.
Don't need it, it's singing.
Let's
No, we're not paving anything.
gravel park.
Oh, sure. Thank you.
Okay, well, moving right on to 10.3 zoning amendment application 1352. Ms. Bill.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The number of presentations this evening, I'm going to try my verbal presentations as brief as possible. So starting with the zoning amendment bylaw 1352, this application is for 691 Campbell Street. So this is for the redevelopment of the existing the property that is accessed from Nielsen and Pacific Rim Highway. It's currently an industrial zoned lot that we're looking to redevelop into residential. So the total lot area is about 0.3 hectare. And the new zone is intended to accommodate a multifamily development with an ancillary second, single-family dwelling permitted on site. Because this is drafted as a general zone, that site-specific provision has been included at the bottom of the bylaw. So the total development as proposed will include a 10-unit multifamily dwelling with that repurposed shed into a single-family dwelling, totaling 11 units. There will be permissions for home occupations, but it will expressly exclude short-term rentals as well as bed and breakfast uses, and will permit accessory buildings and uses in accordance with Part 4. So some highlights from this evaluation are that it was found that it was generally in alignment with the village land use policy, as well as its response to the housing need in our community, both in the preferred form and area of development or of the community for development. This is a redevelopment of a pre-disturbed site, so there are no environmental considerations. There will be provisions for landscaping, so in this instance, we will be looking at an improved situation on site. And there are 2 units of affordable housing included, for which we've got on the agenda this evening for consideration. So I won't go too far into the housing agreement provisions until the next presentation. So next steps, as this is third reading of the bylaw, we are currently just in legal review of the draft covenant and housing agreement. And the one that was included with the agenda might be, there might be some slight edits depending on the timing of the access and servicing agreement or the easement that is required. We might pull that out of the agreement, but nothing of substance that would impact sort of the core terms of that agreement that we've presented to council. The finalizing of the housing agreement is subject to bylaw adoption, and then the applicant is, as I mentioned, to register the easement as it's between 2 private properties. We want to ensure that that is in place prior to any further approvals. So with that, it brings us to the recommendation that this application receives. Any questions?
Looking to council for clarity. Seeing none, comments from council, Councillor Anderson and Councillor Spalding.
Okay. I don't know if there's a question or just a comment, but my only concern with the application is that there is enough parking on site, and that parking doesn't, there's really nowhere for it to spill out on the Campbell Street side, and it could impact the neighborhood of Pfeiffer Crescent if it spills out onto those streets. So I'm, want to be mindful of that. There's enough parking for the units and a few visitors.
Maybe we can turn that into a question and look for a response.
Yes, thank you for the question through the chair. That is a good question. Parking is always top of our mind, especially in the downtown core. Unfortunately, this property is going to be limited to the number of parking spaces that they're going to be able to provide based on the parking criteria for turnaround and loading and whatnot. And if that was a consideration that council wanted to ensure that the parking met the zoning requirements or in surplus of the zoning requirements, we would just look to limit the number of dwelling units that they would be able to provide. So at this point, at the third reading would be the time to comment on the maximum number of dwelling units, and then we can incorporate that into the zone. That would be how we would manage the parking.
Maybe we could just expound on that. What is the situation with the parking per unit right now, so that we're all clear?
As per the parking schedule in the zoning bylaw, I believe it's 1.2. It's 1 parking space per 1.2 dwelling units. I'd have to just confirm that, but within the village containment area, there is direction, and I would say to provide variances for reducing parking, being that there's an accessibility component that areas or developments outside of the village core don't benefit from walking distance to the downtown core, et cetera. But right now, it's not at a ratio of 1-to-1. It is currently, say, deficient, perhaps. But it might be worth evaluating our zoning bylaw parking schedule. That's something that we've been discussing internally.
Okay, I just wanted to see, just to acknowledge Councilor Anderson's question, and then it's third reading, so if council was wanting to address a parking deficiency, now would be the time. So is that what you're suggesting, Councilor Anderson? You consider at this time? Maybe we'll just look to council, just count any other councilors want to take the time right now to address parking further at this third reading. Councilor Sawyer.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, I also share Councillor Anderson's concerns about parking. Just generally from what we've seen more recently in our higher density housing areas, that 1.2-to-1 ratio isn't really cutting it. So I personally would be more comfortable seeing a 1-to-1 ratio at minimum.
Mr. Thomas, I'm just going to start.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, just looking at the site plans, it looks like they're proposing 15 parking spaces for the 11 dwellings and designated bike parking, which I like to see because I lived in Viewwood, which was also kind of higher density and also had the one parking space per unit, even though some were 2-bedroom. And bike parking was a late addition. So having that included in the plan, I think is really helpful, and noting that it is walkable to a lot of things in town. I feel comfortable with what's proposed.
Okay. Councilor Steer.
Yes, thank you through the chair. Yeah, I support, as Councillor Thomas is saying, one of the things that has always been a challenge, and I acknowledge some of the issues around parking and the potential for spillover, as Councillor Anderson has indicated and Councillor Sawyer has indicated, living in a higher density units. But I'd have to agree with Councillor Thomas. One of the things that I'd rather park people than cars, and if we have ways of mitigating that through those biking parking lanes, as well as our accessibility to multiple use path and our transit system, I'm hoping that that will mitigate that. So I'm comfortable with the present ratio as it stands, with the acknowledgement that yes, there may be some issues, but if we can acknowledge and support the multi-modal transportation plan and the provisions within there to cut down on the need for cars, I'd be very much more supportive of housing people than cars.
Okay, I'm just going to do a quick survey of the rest of council. Sounds like we're generally 15 spots for the 11 new units. Seems to be amenable to half of council. At least, Councilor Sloman, final word.
Yeah, I feel comfortable with the parking as it is, because as said by previous councillors, it's pretty close to downtown. I feel like it's walkable. And I feel like it's not so high density that if there was a shortage, it's gonna create a drastic impact on that neighborhood. It's a fairly small high density.
Okay. I think unless there's a significant uptick in rejection of the parking, we should probably just carry. Councillor Anderson, I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, I'm not going to hold it up over the parking or anything, but I just felt looking at the size plan, they could squeeze a little bit more in. Cross that bridge when they come to it.
Okay. Unless there's any more comments or questions for clarity. Seeing none, would a council like to read the recommendation?
I move that the District of Tofino zoning amendment bylaw number 1352/2025 be read a third time.
Seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any further comments? All in favor? None opposed, motion carried. Okay, 10.4 housing agreement bylaw 1356.
Maybe up here for a while. So moving on to the housing agreement that I just spoke to for the previous bylaw. The housing agreement, number 1356, 691 Campbell Street.
Clicker is giving us problems.
Okay, so in establishing this housing agreement bylaw, the bulk of the work was surrounding the rent values. So we're looking at 2 units of affordable housing out of the 10 in the multifamily development or in the complex. Through some exercises of pulling statistics from Stats Canada as well as from Vital, the CB2 or Plateau Biosphere Trust's vital signs data, we came up with a range between 613 and about 1,053. And that's based on the site-specific design. Because they're going to have a little bit of flexibility in the units that they provide for the affordable housing, we took the approach of applying the square footage model. So this equation here, the rent range is based on about 86 cents per square foot. The housing agreement does allow for a CPI or an increase, a rent increase based on the CPI. So they would be limited to that rent value increase annually. We have included building standards to ensure that the affordable housing units are built to a certain level of standard in consideration that they're purpose-built staff housing units. Want to make sure that although there may be some costs, that they're still built to certain expectation. The housing agreement also includes eligibility criteria for tenancy. As I noted, this rent value is going to be based on the square footage to allow that flexibility. The units are varying sizes. So this was the best approach to be able to apply that affordability across depending on which unit they chose to go with. These values were, again, rooted in the Stats Canada values for Tofino, as well as the BC averages through CBP's vital signs. And then they also were compared to the BC housing affordability ranges through the housing income limits that were provided by the Tofino Housing Corporation. I already mentioned that they will be capped. Rent increase will be capped annually, and there will be a requirement for a statutory declaration as well as tenancy agreements to secure the housing from a tenancy perspective. So next steps for this bylaw is to finalize the terms and execute the housing agreement. It then needs to be registered on title for it to be enforceable. It will run with the land, and it will ensure that the affordable housing units are secured for the length of term that the district deems they want those for the units to be in place. And with that, I'm going to put the recommendation on the board, but I anticipate maybe some questions and comments from council.
Super, thank you, Mr. And I have one, and it just goes back to item 10.3, and you made a comment about possible slight edits following legal review. What were those potential edits specifically?
For the housing agreement, we're not anticipating any edits. We're mostly anticipating edits in the development agreement rooted in the bylaw. And that was because the timing of the easement, and if we were to include the easement requirement in the development agreement, the lawyers mentioned that we may need to include the terms of that easement. So it's just easier to register the easement in advance of the development agreement or in advance of the zoning adoption.
Okay, thank you for that clarity. Councilor Steer.
Yes, thank you through the chair. Just a quick question for clarity. Thank you for the report. It's my understanding that rent increases are mandated by the province, and in the report you had indicated that they would be capped at CPI. Has that changed, or does a housing agreement supersede that? Just a question for clarity.
Thank you for the question through the chair. Under the housing agreement, we have the authority to set a rent value in perpetuity. But understanding that it's not in the best interest for the landlord to not have the freedom and flexibility to respond to inflation. And so there is a permission within the Residential Tenancy Act that grants the authority to increase rent annually. And that may be where what you're speaking to. But the authority is within the discretion of the district to either set that value or allow it to be increased.
And just quick follow-up. Yeah, just as a long-term, providing long-term rental, my understanding through the province is that I can't arbitrarily, the province tells me how much I can increase rent, potentially increase rents each year. So, but that is different than in this particular housing agreement through the District of Tofino.
Thank you for the question through the chair. It's my understanding that the provincial increases are also rooted in the consumer price index. So I may be incorrect and it might be worth looking into. But
I think for clarity, I think just what we're saying, Councillor Steer, my for clarity understanding is that if we did not write in allowing CPI increases, then those rents would be capped and not allow the applicant to raise per CPI as allowed in the BC tenancy. Does that make sense? If you didn't put it in there, they couldn't do it. It's allowed in the Tenancy Act, but if you didn't put it in there, they wouldn't be allowed. Is that not correct? Is that what I understand?
That sounds accurate.
Okay. And if it isn't CPI, I'm pretty sure that the Tenancy Act allows for CPI inflation increases. So if it isn't, then we can come back and maybe correct that. Unless somebody wants to do it right now. Any other comments? Councillor McMaster.
Just a comment, 2 units out of 10 being affordable. That's quite good for Tofino. Historically, we tend to be at 10%, so I'm quite happy to see this. Thank you.
The applicant has been very willing to just provide housing. Seems to be just an overall generally an overall good project for the housing perspective.
Councillor Thomas.
Councillor Mustard kind of stole my comment, but I'd like to say it anyway, that I really appreciate the applicant's willingness to provide affordable housing, because it is something that comes up with lots of developments, and yeah, it often gets knocked down to a lower number. So the fact that they've kept it where it is really appreciated. I also noticed in the previous report, there was a section where they talked about their willingness to work on water catchment. And in previous ones, there's one to say that I agree.
Super. And maybe, you know, what we can do, just because the CPI question isn't, can we have that clarified right now if it takes less than 30 seconds? We just look up BC Tenancy Act increases by CPI, and then we can save hours of work and coming to council.
Previous housing agreements, such as the one at Crabapple, it's been tied to CPI. So that's something that we've done previously. And when we think about headwaters, where we have rent geared to income, those increase, nothing to do with CPI. Those increase if your paycheck goes up, your rent goes up. So there definitely is a few different categories where that's applicable, and where this is affordable housing that probably falls under a slightly different category.
I just want to if we can get an answer and we can carry on, we don't have to come back, just to save time and staff time. Mr. Rogers.
Mayor Law, I'm being told by our team that as we've written it is appropriate.
Okay.
And so I think we can move forward now. If for some reason we're wrong, we'll bring it back to council.
Councillor Anderson.
I believe this is the same type of agreement we have at Gateway and other housing agreements, so I'm satisfied.
Okay, I'm going to look to council. Maybe we'll just we'll call this good. Is council good with this, or CPI? Yes. Okay. No objections. In that case, there are no more comments, no more questions. Would the councillor like to read the recommendation? That's Thomas.
I move that District of Tofino Housing Agreement Bylaw number 1356/2026 be introduced and read first, second, and third time.
Second.
Second by Councillor Pastor. Any further comments? Seeing none, all in favor? None opposed, motion. 10.6. Oh, sorry, 10.4. 10.5. Didn't buy that.
Moving on to the zoning amendment bylaw number 1336 for 1211 Pacific Rim Highway. This application is, or this presentation is for first reading of a proposed zoning amendment to permit the development of staff accommodation. So the subject parcel that we're speaking to today is 1211 Pacific Rim Highway. It's approximately 37 acres that runs from Pacific Rim Highway all the way to the natural boundary on the west. The proposed zoning is a split zone approach, which is going to primarily focus on the eastern portion of the lot, which is shaded out there with the diagonal lines. And that amounts to approximately 2 hectares of land. The proposal will accommodate the development of 2 buildings, purpose-built staff accommodation that is intended to service the Q&amp. This is going to accommodate 32 beds in total, so each building will have 16 units. We're presuming single occupancy, but some of them could have double occupancy depending on the family arrangement. The parking for this development in the site plan that was provided to council was providing less than the 1-to-1 ratio for parking. So staff spoke with the applicant and there was a willingness to increase that parking requirement, considering we're outside of the village containment area and there's already concerns with parking in that public use sort of zone with the North Chesterman, Middle Chesterman, South Chesterman overflow. And so the applicant will be providing a ratio of 1-to-1. So we'll be looking at 32 parking spaces. There is a permission or proposed development of 2 accessory buildings. One would be a outdoor shower facility with board and bike storage. And then there is also a gazebo for outdoor social space. The primary access to this development will be off the new access road that was installed across from Sharp Road. So this is a new intersection. The highlights of this evaluation are that the proposal generally aligns with the land use policy for the ocean interface land use designation, provides a long-term permanent housing solution for meeting their direct staffing or employee needs. We're hoping that by the provision of developing this purpose-built staff housing, it will provide housing or it will free up some housing in other areas of the community that are currently being occupied by Q&amp staff. This development has directly responded to environmentally sensitive areas within the proximity of the property. This was discovered through the development permit process and in the installation of that driveway access. So there has been a building site movement in response to the discovery of the PFOG. This application has also incorporated, or the applicants have incorporated hazard mitigation in their planning as well, which was included in the council package. It should be noted though, although I did state it in the report, but just to reiterate that staff are not asking council today to approve or evaluate that hazard plan so as not to assume any liability of whether that plan is effective. So there, should this application be advanced today, there are a number of items to be addressed, primarily rooted in the servicing complexities of the lot. So we have an unregistered looped water main that extends from Pacific Rim Highway all the way around to Osprey Lane. It's the district's interest to secure that right of way and to ensure the this currently unmetered, unregistered water main is not a vulnerability for the district. The applicants are willing to assign that ownership. There is some legacy servicing with regards to the existing cabin on the 1211 lot, which does not conform to the current servicing bylaws or policy. So we've got some negotiating and conversations to have with the applicants. There are some challenges with intersection with surrounding parcels. The water main currently intersects with multiple pieces of land, including the 610 Hellison over the 1211 and then loops around, that we need to discuss with the applicant on how best to manage that easement and the statutory right of way and registering of those. There is currently a plan for a supplemental water system that involves some significant rain catchment. This report needs to be supported by engineering and whatnot. So we've had a preliminary review, but there will be some more detailed design work that's going to be required before any final approvals can be granted. There is an existing fire flow deficiency within the neighborhood, and so this is part of the reason for the siting in that area closest to the Pacific Rim Highway, in that south of Lynn Road. It's my understanding that the infrastructure does not have the capacity to service the proposed development. And there will be a requirement for either sprinklering and the installation of a private hydrant in order to mitigate for that fire flow deficiency that needs to be discussed. There's also a question of whether the sewer has capacity. So there will be some requirement for sewer modeling as well. So with all those considerations in mind, there's also sort of the work behind that involves the negotiation of the terms for the right of way. There's going to be some asset management considerations in terms of costs, life costs, et cetera. We want to ensure that the infrastructure as it stands right now is we want to know what the status is. And so there's some investigative work that needs to be conducted. There was a recent road that was installed over top of the right of way, over top of the water main. So we want to ensure that any potential for water main movement, we may want to explore a more updated survey of that infrastructure as well. There is a development agreement in the works. A few of these pieces will be incorporated into the development agreement should the file be advanced, including a future evacuation route that has been identified in the OCP that extends from Osprey Lane all the way up to Cedarwood Place. Although this area of the parcel is not currently under consideration for development, it would be prudent to get to secure that evacuation route early, so that at the time when that development does occur, the applicant is aware, the district is aware that these conversations have occurred. In order to, just speaking back to the servicing complexities, it did come up that it would be the best option to sort of manage those complexities would be to subdivide. Split zone does create a lot of sort of challenges. We've got a few lots in the district that are proven examples of where, when subdivisions don't occur, and it causes a little bit of confusion. There are some limitations on or challenges within legislation if there's a split zone but not actually a parcel that exists. There comes into question as to whether or not setbacks apply. So there's a few reasons why we would want to be seeking subdivision prior to approval of any split zoning. There is a conversation around the establishment of a housing agreement for this development, although it's primarily rooted in just ensuring that it would be employee housing. There's no measures of affordability being negotiated. There would be DCC reductions that the applicant would be eligible for should they enter into a housing agreement for employee housing. And then the discussion around connectivity and having safe access, because that new access across from Sharp Road would be the most reasonable place for any occupants to access the MUP without that safe crossing. We want to explore further whether or not they would be feasible to put a crosswalk in place, but that also reinforces the rationale for having that evacuation route that leads up to Cedarwood that would then provide access to the nearest safe crossing at Hellison. Alternatively, occupants can go down to Lynn Road to the safe crossing at that intersection. Well, there is some work to do. This application was, public notice was distributed via hand mail as well as mailed. The applicants erected a notice of application sign on the property, and that sign has been up since the OCP amendment that was related to this development early on, back in 2023. It was published in one edition of the Westerly News, May 20th, and after the notifications went out, I did receive a letter with 6 names, all of which are residents of Lynn Road, which I believe was shared with council. And so there's concerns of noise, sighting, environmental impacts, as well as lighting. So all of those, I did respond to the applicant, as well as noted that many of the concerns were addressed in the report to council. So with that, I will just leave you with the recommendation that the zoning amendment bylaw be introduced and read a first time.
Super, thank you, Ms. Gruba. I'm gonna open it up to council for questions for clarity. Councilor Flowman.
My questions come from the 6 writers there. And one that I'm looking for clarity on is that lot that is between the proposed development and the residential lots. What is the future of that lot? Because I understand that is where the bog lies. So would that maybe be protected in the future by environmental?
Thank you for the question through the chair. So the, I believe it's 567 Osprey Lane. So it is currently it's about a 4-acre lot that is zoned A1. So the current permissions would allow for residential development to a maximum of 2 dwellings. And so the likelihood of that being developed is subject to the property owner's discretion. They could develop under the current zoning if they wish. So if they were to develop, that area is subject to development permit requirements, which then would build in the environmental protections. So as far as I understand it, the bog does sort of run from the eastern side of the development, and it sort of extends down a little bit further than beyond the property line. I'm not sure how far over it does extend behind those Lynn Road properties, but any development of that lot would be subject to environmental review to identify any environmentally sensitive areas prior to any land clearing that would be permitted through the current zoning.
Councilor Steer.
Thank you through the chair, and Councillor Sloman asked partially the question that I had in there, but thank you for responding to the inquiries that came forward. And I'm wondering, Ms. Gruba, if in your response back to the applicants, had they was that satisfactory? Were there concerns addressed, or have you heard back from the respondents?
Thank you for the question through the chair. So I did receive a response back from one of the applicants via email that they received my response with no additional questions or comments. There was a letter writer here this evening who signed up to speak. I did have a moment to have a conversation with him outside and address some of his questions, which were rooted in the distance or proximity of the development from his property, and seemed to alleviate any concerns. The distance is, as a crow flies, from the nearest property about 82 meters. There was a substantial setback that was provided between the proposed development and that southern lot boundary of about 25 meters to account for any vegetative buffering or noise buffering that to mitigate impacts to the neighbors to the south. And that was as far as the comments and questions went.
And maybe just for clarity for us, I know the three major concerns were noise, environmental impacts, and lighting. And then there was the letter, there was talk of an amphitheater, and I know you addressed many of those things. Could you just briefly address them for us now, as you did for them?
Absolutely, thank you for the question. So I didn't speak to the amphitheater specifically, in consideration that there was a substantial vegetative buffer between the proposed development and the lots. There is a significant amount of work that's going to need to be conducted for site design and sort of responding to environmental servicing, etc. And so it may be that the design will change slightly. The zone has been drafted to provide some flexibility to be able to respond to things that come up through that more comprehensive design exercise. So the lighting, every development subject to development permit is subject to the dark sky policy provisions, which were included in the initial development permit agreement. So those terms were included. Should they proceed with this staff accommodation, they will not be subject to form and character. And so any sort of commentary on form and character or citing that council wishes to lock in at this point, it would be most appropriate to do it through the zoning.
Okay, thank you. I did have just a comment. I noticed that the amphitheater comments is actually, it feels like the sound is facing north away from the properties, and maybe as it goes on, if there was a block in that one gap between the two buildings, that would perhaps mitigate a little bit of noise. But it seems like the noise is going to be, if it's out windows, it's going to be either into the middle or out to the forest, not down to the property. So I was happy to see that. And the other thing is the parking. A lot of times lighting comes from the parking lighting. I'm not sure how the dark sky policy works, but if the lighting was lower down at foot level as opposed to the high lighting that's been put in, even though we have dark sky policy, that really does cast light farther, and it may impact some of those properties. Even though they're far away, they may get a beam of light through their back windows, which I could see being annoying. My own comment. And I was happy to see that they had, intentionally tried to cite it so that there was as little environmental impact as possible. So I was happy to see that as well. Councillor Steer.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Law. Are we just in comments now, unless there was further questions? I really am supportive of the project because it's one of those areas in terms of staff housing, which has been an issue within our community for a long time. This is an applicant that is now taking it upon themselves to address that issue in a way that I think is going to work well. There are a number of outstanding issues that have been identified by by district staff. And I'm looking forward to the solutions to those, because there are many. There are some benefits that I think can accrue to the district in terms of the infrastructure pieces that are already installed. So I'm supportive of it, but I look forward to seeing what those solutions will be. And I think there are a number of recommendations from staff in terms of an SROW, in terms of the support for a subdivision. And then the other piece that I do support in terms of staff recommendations was not seeking CACs for this proposal for the reasons that were outlined in the report. So that's my comments.
Councillor Sloman, Councillor Anderson, comments.
Yeah, I have a couple of comments. One of my comments was, I feel like this is a good project to go ahead, but one of my main concerns comes from a previous letter writer in the past that wrote about large constructions in residential areas and the impact on neighborhoods and what noise causes of large builds like this and how they can be pushed out over time. So I'd really like to see those comments from that letter writer be addressed before the starts, because I feel like this could have the same impacts that letter writer was feeling over many years. If it gets stretched out over many years, it could really have a detrimental impact on those neighbors. And then a couple of the things that I really like about this is I like the idea of asking for the subdivision ahead of time. I I jog by this area quite often and I see the workers going to work all the time. They're often on foot, so I feel like we don't need to really emphasize like excessive parking. So I feel like what we have is good for that. One of my concerns was the 3 stories. I feel like that could also have a negative impact on the neighborhood, and I feel like we don't. In their design, they have 2 stories, and I feel like that's still a good thing that I would like to see going forward. I feel like if we start pushing it to 3 stories out in that neighborhood, then that could be kind of trend setting for the buildings out there. So I personally like 2 stories. Yeah, and I appreciate the moving the site for the environmentally sensitive area too, because I really appreciate that. That's all.
Councilor Anderson and Councilor Thomas.
I appreciate some of the comments that have been brought forward based on the responses we got by letter. I'm wondering what protects that vegetative buffer between the lot lines off of Lynn Road and what will be the newly subdivided lot. Because I think that goes a long ways to addressing those concerns about impact to those lots. The citing, I'd like to know if that is sort of finalized in the zoning as we move forward, or is there still more to come before the siting of the buildings is finalized? Because that will make a difference to those concerns. So, yeah, those are my 2 questions. The vegetative buffer is good, but is it protected? And the siting of the buildings, as it's shown, is pretty good. But how much is that subject to change as we work through these other issues?
For the question through the chair. So the first question being the siting, are you wondering, because the letter writers were concerned about the siting being outside of that proposed 2 hectare sort of split zone and closer to the hotel itself. And I believe that the siting was rooted primarily in the ability to service it. As I mentioned, there's infrastructure limitations. If we're going to be servicing any developments from south of Lynn Road, we're at the Lynn Road junction for the infrastructure team over here. And so that would require servicing through Osprey and then up. And so it was just more cost effective and more of a straightforward works and services to be closer to that Pacific Rim junction.
Pretty firm.
But there is flexibility somewhat within that 2 hectare zone. So they could move, I would say the probability of moving would likely be closer to the western portion of that split zone. Because the bog being on the eastern portion, and then they've got a very limited amount of movement to the south. So somewhat flexible. As I mentioned, this is being first reading, this would be the time to sort of solidify any of those desires for the applicant to consider. The second question around the buffering, because they're in the development permit area, they would be required to go through a development permit process in order to remove any of that vegetation. The development permit that they did receive for the site, the exploration, the remediation of the bog after the first exploratory works, as well as the access, they were limited to the further site clearing to accommodate the building until such time as they received zoning. And so it's within the district's interest to not just distribute or issue development permits for just general land clearing without a proposed development or any sort of proposed use of that area, just to ensure that the environmental integrity is maintained until such time. And that's always up for discussion or discretion based on the applicants and their desired use of their property and within their existing zoning rights and how they want to use their land. But I would say that it's unlikely that they would receive a development permit just to clear land for no building and no proposed use.
Okay. So it's limited by the subdivision, the environmental concerns and service.
Okay. Maybe just to follow up on that question, if I may, Councillor Anderson, maybe I'm hearing you, is there the potential for a covenant on that vegetation to be on the DPA that council could consider, approaching with the applicant? Or is that just reading into Councillor Anderson?
Thank you for the question. Absolutely. If council wishes to pursue a conservation covenant for the southern portion, we could also explore applying it to the peat bog, which has already been identified as a sensitive area. That's absolutely something that we could negotiate with the applicants.
And if that was an option, when would council optimally throw that to staff?
It would be appropriate to direct staff now, as we're in early days of the negotiation. Anytime really, anytime prior to third reading would be appropriate. There's no public hearing for this development. So generally, we don't want to bring anything new beyond third reading. So the applicants are aware of what their requirements are.
Thank you. Sorry if I'm reading into that, Councillor Anderson, but that's an option. I think I'm sure if you're interested in that, but there it is. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you. No questions, just comments. Appreciating that this seems to be incredibly complex, all of the servicing that's required, but it sounds like it'll be a positive for the district to have access to all of those. And I think it's really great that they're incorporating the rainwater catchment for the non-potable water. And I know that this isn't going to happen quickly, given how complex it is, but I'm really excited to see that in practice, especially for a multi-unit dwelling. And I know that it's going to come with all sorts of complexities for staff in regards to figuring out costs for sewer and stuff like that. But this is exactly what we've been looking for like climate readiness, and it's great to see a response to that.
If I may just follow up on the comment about the third story as well, and the rain catchment is a consideration of that. They're going to have to sort of dig into a more comprehensive design to ensure that this supplemental system is viable. So the third story was to provide them with some flexibility if they needed to put catchment on the main level. If council wishes to cap the stories at 2, that would be something that I could incorporate into the bylaw, absolutely. But keeping in mind that the consideration for that catchment would, they may come forward with a variance in the future, but that's always an avenue that we can explore.
Okay, we do have a couple concerns or a couple comments from council that I think can bear exploring from council now. If the majority of councils are interested in directing staff at this time, I think one is 2-story or 3-story. I'd certainly be in favor of 2 stories. I have 3 stories. If there's lighting, for instance, or noise on 3 stories, that's going to travel a lot farther than 2 stories, and that is some of the neighbors' concerns. So I'd be interested in hearing council's opinion on 2 or 3 stories, and also the potential for floating by an environmental covenant on the southern portion of the bog. I think that's something that has been brought up. So I'd like to hear what council has to say about that. Give at least a leading direction to staff. That's something that we want. And if there's anything else that I've missed, now is the time. Councillor Steer.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Law, through the chair. And I hear Councillor Sloman's concerns and around moving capping at 2 stories. My only concern around that, and I acknowledge some of the issues that have been brought up by that, My only concern is when we cap at 2 stories and in terms of development and where we can reduce costs, and so that would be reduced costs, I suspect would be reflected in the staff housing and what that would cost those staff. As you limit the amount of density, you're going to increase costs. So by limiting at 2, the cost increases will expedite per square footage. There. So that probably is my biggest concern about putting a cap on the 2 stories, and also as indicated by staff around the potential for a rain catchment and waiting to see what those design implications may be warranted around that 3rd story. I'd be interested to see that before making a definitive decision on capping it at 2 stories.
Great. Councillor Thomas, Councillor McMaster. Who's first?
Okay, I was just gonna echo Councillor Steer's comments. I'm not interested in capping this at 2 to make sure that there's the flexibility to ensure that the rainwater catchment, just in case. I think it would be an unnecessary step to, if it does turn out that they need to put that above level, to then have to go through another variance. And it doesn't look like they're proposing to build a 3rd floor of housing. And I'm also just generally, not just specific to this, but generally in favor of the fact that we know we can build up for cost just in general. And I guess to the thing about having a covenant for environmental protections, it does sound like it's somewhat unnecessary based on just the topography of the site. But if council felt strongly for it, then I would be in favor.
Councillor McMaster.
Yeah, I was thinking, I don't really want to cap it at 2 stories. I believe the houses on Lynn Road are fairly big. They're also built higher terrain, so I think they're probably 3 stories themselves anyway. So until I could actually see how this proposal relates topographically to the Lynn Road, I'd say I'd stick with the 3 stories.
Okay, just on the story thing, and Councillor Anderson, and then I'm going to go to Councillor Sloman, or sorry, Councillor Sawyer, and then to Councillor Sloman.
Yeah, I want to leave enough flexibility for them to work through their issues. So I'm not interested in capping the height or actually going too much further with adding things to an already complicated negotiation. It is a little bit difficult looking at the whole parcel and knowing that it's all under single ownership, knowing what will come in the future, and eventually there will have to be a sort of a more comprehensive land plan coming forward. And I don't know if now is time to start that. I think that will overly complicate this particular zoning. But those service lines were put in that place for some reason, and I'm guessing that a future thought of access back to the highway from the end of Osprey Lane and access through those lands was anticipated somewhere adjacent to those service lines. So probably wasn't recorded by the district, but I recall when the Q&amp did develop that there was a great deal of discussion about whether or not Q&amp should be accessed from Lynn Road or whether they should build their own access road into it. So I think there was some a little bit of discussion way back when that has fallen off the record about another access, and that may come at some point in the future. But I don't want to overly complicate this. The requirement of a higher land plan for the whole parcel. But that will at that point have to be thought of.
Okay, Councillor Sawyer.
Yeah, I'm not in favor of restricting the number of stories, for the reasons stated as far as water storage. And, but I am in favor of when we were talking about, if we can put some sort of protection on the bog and that area.
Okay, I think we've heard everybody. So, it doesn't sound like, the majority of council's in favor of a cap. I would like to say though that, you know, sound and lighting, if it does go to 3 stories, that, you know, staff and the applicant, acknowledge that, 3 stories. If it's open to the south where there's residential areas, that 3 stories make a big difference. And so if those, sound and lighting could be mitigated, and potentially the overall height, because I know that the current, schema has a peaked roof, which of course is 3 stories, but you know, the peaked roof was on 3 stories proper, then it would be higher. So maybe something as well, just to make sure that's going to come. And protection, an official covenant for protection. I've only heard twice from council. Is where is council at? Would council like to see that discussion broached with the applicant through the staff, an actual covenant on the environmental, the southern portion and the bog? We're going to go with Councillor Sawyer, Councillor Sloman, and then Councillor Steer.
Sorry, I was just hoping to, I realized I should have fleshed out my previous comment about the height restriction. Part of the reason why I am not worried about a taller structure and the noise going towards neighbors is because the Wickaninnish tends to be a business that thinks greatly about their customer or their guest experience. And I know that their reputation means a lot to them. So I believe that they would act accordingly and in good faith to make sure that they're creating minimal impact to both their guests and the neighborhood.
Councillor Sloman, and then Councillor Steer, I believe.
Yeah, I just didn't get a chance to comment about the environmental covenant, and I would be in favor of that. As Councillor Sawyer said, I mean, the Wickaninnish has historically been quite gentle on the environment and considerate, and I believe that's part of being a related chateau status. But it could always change hands in the future, and I think a covenant could protect us from.
Okay, maybe not to go on too much further. I'm just going to look to council, but if council is amenable to a covenant on the southern portion of vegetation, whatever that looks like, and then a bog, put your thumb up.
Before we go there, let's not jump to covenant. Let's have maybe direct staff to bring that to a conversation, and maybe it could be a parkland dedication, it could be a number of things. So I'm in favor of staff bringing that motion into the discussion at this point.
Okay, I'm gonna look to council, yeah, sorry, covenant protecting some kind of protective mechanism introduced to the discussion now. We can do that for certainly. Councillor Steer, you have a comment on that?
Yes, thank you through the chair. Yes, I was going to echo Councillor Anderson's comments around bringing options to the table. Covenant is one. There may be other options there, and I think that would be an appropriate response in ways of the protection of that bog. And there may be some better options than a covenant that we may not know.
Super. Excellent. Okay, well then let's just look to council for, is everybody in all councillors unanimous support of broaching the subject of some kind of protection? Yes, thumbs up. Okay, there you go. That's so council's taking note, I believe. And also take a note on the general no cap for 3 stories be okay, but noting that council's made comments on the WIC. That's it from us. Any other comments for staff right now? Okay, seeing none, the counselor would like to read the motion before us.
Again,
Go ahead, Counselor Swilman.
I move that the District of Tofino zoning amendment bylaw number 1336/2026 be introduced and read at first time.
Second by Counselor Thomas. Any further comments? Seeing none, all in favor? None opposed, motion is carried. Okay, 10.6 finally. The zoning amendment bylaw number 1359. Not a difficult one. Oh,
A little bit lighter. Zoning amendment bylaw number 1359 is for 1400%. For consideration of first and second reading. So this property may seem familiar because it was subject to 2 permission to proceed presentations. The total lot area in question is about 5.85 hectares, but we're only speaking to a split zone, which is the southern portion of that larger parcel, which amounts to about 1.32 hectares. So for this application, staff's approach was to draft a new general zone that was primarily rooted in residential development. So we're creating a large acreage residential district to align with the rural land use designation policies referred to as RA4. So this new zone is intended to accommodate a one lot subdivision, and that subdivision or the zone would permit residential development to the maximum of 1 single family dwelling plus a secondary dwelling, either a secondary suite or a caretaker cottage. Home occupations would be permitted as well, but expressly excluded has been the short-term rental and bed and breakfast uses. Accessory buildings and uses would also be permitted in accordance with Part 4 provisions. Maybe I should just comment that this is a shift from what was presented at permission to proceed, where the applicant was seeking the A1 zone. But with that zone came the permissions for commercial operation of the animal hospital, among other things. And so to simplify it and keep it streamlined and highly focused on residential, we opted to mirror the zoning provisions of that rural designation while stripping away the uses for short-term rentals and the commercial facilities. So the overall proposal generally aligns with the rural land use policy. It provides a long-term permanent housing, albeit not in the preferred form or location. It does represent an increase to market housing. There is a balance of providing housing with environmental considerations. The zone was drafted with a little bit extra environmental buffer. So there has been a 30% preservation incorporated, as well as limiting the lot coverage. This applicant has also incorporated hazard mitigation into their planning. And again, the letter that was provided is to demonstrate that the applicant has considered the implications of development within The next steps with this development are to further explore the servicing needs and constraints within that area. The primary infrastructure runs along the eastern portion of the MUP, which is on the other side of the highway. So there will be a little bit of exploratory work required. Again, water and sewer modeling to ensure that the district infrastructure can accommodate the development. This is also, this applicant is intending to move straight into subdivision. So similar to the servicing complexities of the previous, without subdivision, it would be challenging to support a secondary service connection on the opposite side of the highway, given that our current bylaws limit the service connections to single per parcel. So the property is already built out with one development or one single family dwelling and caretaker cottage, for their limited to accessory building development at this stage. the southern portion could theoretically have development of an accessory building on it. But if they wish to have a dwelling and have it serviced, then they would require subdivision. That one was very brief, and we've been reading to the motion that the District of Tofino zoning amendment bylaw number 1359 be read a first and second time.
Super, thank you, Mr. Kriba. This makes a lot of sense to me. Happy to see it here. I'm gonna look to council for any questions for clarity. We can open for some comments if there are any. There are no questions for clarity. Are there any comments council would like to make? Seeing none, would the councillor offer to read the amendment of the recommendation for us?
Go ahead. I'll move that just Tofino zoning amendment for number 1359/2026 be read at first and second.
Second by Councillor Thomas. Any further comments? All in favor? None opposed, motion carried. Thank you.
Very much.
No bylaws, no unfinished business. Business initiated by council members. Councilors. Councillor Steer.
Thank you, through the chair. A couple of updates here. One, the West Coast Committee meeting of the ACRD held on May 20th. There's a few things that relevant to hear us in the West Coast. So the first was the grants and aid recommendation from the West Coast Committee, and there were 6 organizations that we recommended grant funding to, and that was Surfrider, Tla-o-qui-aht Biosphere Trust, the Q&amp Aquarium, Redfish Restoration, Pacific Rim Art Society, and the West Q&amp Area Historical Society. Read my own writing here. There was also an update from the BC Transit Delegation, Seth Wright, and it was some really interesting statistics I think council will be interested in. The significant increase in ridership over our last update. Another great stat is a 99.7% service reliability. That's excellent news. That's just above BC Transit as general. That's above the projected reliability service. Bus shelters that are coming, and some of those project priority shelters will be here at this end of the peninsula. There's a lot more rider on and offing at this end of the peninsula. There will be it's all grant funded, and that work is going to be starting shortly. There was also some discussion around the free shuttle service and the integration of BC Transit. Some of there's a bit of a duplication of service there. So there's ongoing discussions with the district around that timeline, and I don't have any updates as to the extent of those discussions. And the annual report for the West Coast landfill. Once again, we put our garbage out and it disappears, and we don't think much about it. But there's some positive news out there. I've been chair of the Solid Waste Management Planning Advisory Committee, which is mandated by the province. The incredible work that's been done there, and so a lot of positive news coming out there. There's been a decrease in our waste reduction. Waste reduction has been going down, which is excellent. Mostly around our organics diversion and the creation of our organics diversion out there. And many of you may know that we are now Class A or organic compost available to the public for a reasonable cost out there as well. There are a dozen projects completed in 2025 out at our landfill, and probably the biggest project that's going to be going on for 2026 is design, operation, and closure plan. Our landfill is going to be closing in 2062, but the longer we make that last, the better. And I'll finish off there. There's a great MOU with Tofino, the ACRD and Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation around the development and co-management of our airport lands. And this is historic and groundbreaking in terms of the land management planning that goes on in the province. So it's being looked at very closely from around the province. It is new and exciting, and phase 1 of that co-management plan is 90% done at this point. That's it for that update. And then just a quick update on the Q&amp Community School Society. We had our board meeting on May 21st. And just some news there. Caleb will be resigning as our executive director, and he's pursuing some new opportunities. They just had their second child too, as well. So we'll be on a lookout for a new executive director coming to the Wickinninish Community School Society. Once again, a number of programs running. They're really interesting. As if the weather's nice, the school programming goes down, and when the weather's bad, those get filled up very quickly. Everything from chess to skateboarding, etc., etc. And there's also some really good direct collaboration with SD70 and the District of Tofino around the use of the gym facilities and the fields out there. So once again, a great collaborative work between the District of Tofino and SD70 on the usage of those facilities. And that's it.
Great news. Councillor Sloman.
Yeah, on May 13th, the Recreation Advisory Committee met, and we had an update about the Recreation Parks Master Plan. And we do have a recommendation coming to council that came out of that regarding accessibility to the provincial park out at Kennedy Lake. And yeah, we did have an update from the recreation team, and all the programs have really good attendance, and especially one of the shiners is the seniors programs. So if you have a senior, get them to go to the wonderful recreation activities.
I hear only good things about that all the time. It's great. All the recreation. Super. Any other inputs from councillors? Seeing none, we're going to move on to question period. Ms. Larson, have an open call.
Thanks, Mayor Law. I'll now make an open call for questions to both members of the public present in the gallery and those participating online. For those in the gallery who wish to speak, please raise your hand. If there's anyone attending online via Zoom that would like to ask a question, you can do so now using the Q&A function. Before asking a question, you will need to state your name, your address, and the agenda item you're speaking to. I will now do a call. Calling once. Calling twice. Calling 3 times. No questions at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. And, I'll move us into the close from the chair. Recommend that the meeting be closed to public in sections 90. 1C, 92GI, the community charter, discussion item related to 91C, labor relations or other employee relations, 92B, consideration received in health confidence related to negotiations. I, between the municipality and provincial government, federal government controls, between the federal government and federal government controls. And by Councilor Thomas, favorite. We're going to take probably a 7-minute break. Closed. Money.